Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Think about it, okay, Sam? You can't tell me that such a thought has never crossed your mind. It was Julie, my wife of 6 years, trying to convince me that we should consider switching with another couple. I wasn't thrilled with the idea. Of course, there were times when I thought it would be fun to get a stranger's ass. Between the year of courtship and the 6 years of marriage, 7 years of exclusivity with one woman have passed. And during those 7 years, there were many women who made it very clear that their bodies were available for my pleasure. I admit that I was tempted, but only tempted. Too many of my friends' marriages have fallen apart because one, or both, of the spouses who swore allegiance couldn't resist when something strange got in their way. I have to admit that I'm not exactly a saint. My virtuous behavior was partly explained by the simple fact that Julie is an absolute stunner. A pretty face, eyes you can get lost in, a body that belongs in Playboy, and a libido that still makes me dizzy. Why tempt fate? But then my wife tried to convince me that switching places could be fun. Obviously, all the work that I put in to make Julie happy and contented with our lives was in vain. So I did my best to explain to Julie the reasons why it wouldn't work. My arguments weren't the best. It came out of nowhere. I've just finished my second ale, and I admit that maybe I'm not very good at making counter-arguments when I'm emotional, or after 2 servings of high-octane ale. Julie, I have no desire to watch some asshole use you. Okay, then we'll do it in separate rooms. I don't want some guy using you in our bed. You take the master bedroom, and the other guy and I can use the guest room. What about diseases? We will make everyone take tests and find out the results before the exchange. Julie, you seem to have an awful lot of answers. How long have you been thinking about this? It's only been a couple of weeks, Sam, but I've read about it. I wouldn't want to do anything that could jeopardize our marriage. You don't think making love to another guy won't jeopardize our marriage, do you? Not if we both agree to it in advance and both get something out of it. It's about sharing, not changing. Julie noticed my hesitation. Damn, I can't believe she brought it up after I finished my second ale. It wasn't fair. Or maybe that's why she's talking about it now. I'll tell you what, Sam. We won't be in a hurry. I'll put an ad in Real Detroit Weekly. We will meet several potential couples. If something seems wrong, we will stop it. No harm, no violations. Now let's go to bed. Like a lamb to the slaughter, I let my wife take my hand and lead me upstairs to our bedroom. The combination of beer, emotions, the sight of my wife taking off her clothes, yes, even after all these years, this sight could excite me excessively, and the rush of blood to my little head ensured that I was crazy about Julie and her grandiose plans. I did everything I could to turn Julie's world around that night. Call me stupid, naive, whatever you want. But imagine my surprise when Julie sat down to dinner next week and told me the news. We have already received 14 decent responses to our ad. Yes, like I said, it's stupid. What kind of announcement? Our ad is in the Real Detroit, silly. Julia got up from the table and took out the latest issue of the Real Detroit from her briefcase. She handed it to me, opening it in the Personal Affairs section. There was an ad circled under the heading, Couples Looking for Couples. An attractive, clean white couple, not bi, about 20 years old, looking for the same thing to exchange partners. I've read this damn article at least 3 times. Julie, I don't remember saying yes to that. What the hell? Sam, I just thought it got you so worked up last weekend that you agreed. Damn, you've been horny for hours. You had a glassy, vacant look. I knew you were imagining yourself with someone new. It's not like that. Julie really had the nerve to start laughing about it. I started sulking. Julie stopped laughing, sat on my lap, and kissed me. Listen, Sam, I didn't bring up the exchange because I was unhappy. I thought it would add an element of fun and excitement. I thought we could have a little fun with this before having kids and becoming a typical suburban family with a minivan and strollers. Julie hesitated for a moment before continuing. I'll tell you what. Let's just try and see what happens. This will give us a chance to overcome the conventions, at least for a while. Didn't I say that already? Stupid, naive me. I didn't say no, and the train kept moving. It didn't take Julie long to arrange a meeting with the couple she chose from all the answers. The following weekend, Julie and I were preparing the house for an evening of entertainment with our new friends. There were 2 trays of snacks on the table in front of the fireplace, as well as open bottles of Merlot and Pinot Blanco. There were 2 sofas on either side of the table. Everything was ready for the happy couple to meet. Everyone except me. I kept thinking how angry Julie would be if, or when, I'll throw the potential changelings back out the door. But I didn't do it. The doorbell rang, and Julia and I opened the door together. Kyle and Susan were standing there. Kyle had a big smile on his face, and Susan looked just like me. It was as if the guillotine had suddenly appeared and we were condemned. Kyle had a dozen roses in one hand and a bottle of Burgundy in the other. Julie motioned them in. No sooner had the door closed than Kyle handed the bottle to me and hugged Julie with his free hand. Susan stood rooted to the spot, clearly not knowing how to greet me. They were an attractive couple. Kyle was at least 10 centimeters taller than my 180 centimeters, obviously a gym lover or some kind of athlete. He had that handsome, stern look that women seem to love. Susan was a cutie, although she would have been even more beautiful if she had smiled. She really surpassed Julie in terms of figure. Maybe her bust was a little smaller, but the whole set was something that would make most men salivate. We were introduced to each other and wine was poured. We sat and chatted. Each couple was on their own couch, but Julia was sitting across from Kyle and Susan was sitting across from me. I was about to pour wine into everyone's glasses when Julie stood up and announced, "Well, we all know why we're here." She reached out, grabbed Kyle's arm, and lifted him off the couch. "Let's go into the bedroom, Kyle." She looked at me with a smile on her face. "See you in the morning." Dazed, not thinking anything, I just sat and watched the two of them go into the guest bedroom. I finally came to my senses and looked at Susan. What just happened? I'm surprised they lasted so long. I've never seen Kyle so excited. He walked with a boner almost all day. Have you two done this before? No. Kyle came home last week with a copy of The Real Detroit and told me he had answered your ad. He said that we were going to open up our marriage. I had no choice in the matter. You don't seem to like it too much. Why did you post the ad if you're so doubtful? I didn't do it. Julie did it. Like you, I was stunned by all this. Look, don't get me wrong because you're a very attractive woman, but if you don't mind, I'd rather spend some time getting to know each other better. Do you mind if we wait a bit before we go to the bedroom? Susan looked at me as if she had just received a reprieve from execution. Yes, I would like that. That's exactly what we did. We sat down on one of the sofas and talked. I liked her, but from our conversation I realized that she was one of those women who needed a huge dose of self-confidence. She knew she was beautiful, but she thought she was poorly compared to women like Julie, and was reluctant to share her views on most of the topics we discussed. It must have been an hour. Susan and I were still sitting and talking quietly with the lights off when Kyle came out of the bedroom and into the kitchen. He was naked, and his body lit up when he opened the refrigerator door. Kyle took 2 beers out of the fridge and padded back into the bedroom without noticing Susan and me. I understand Kyle is well hung up. Yes, it's big down there. If he's not careful, it can hurt. I think this may be the reason for his exchange. Damn, that's the last thing I wanted to hear. I lifted Susan off the couch. Okay, why don't I show you the bedroom? You can sleep in our bed and I'll take the chair. I gave Susan one of my t-shirts to sleep in, and she insisted that I share her bed. I put one of the king-sized pillows between us. I've heard that Mennonite couples do this when they get engaged so they can sleep together without violating their virtue. I don't know if this is true, but it seemed to me that I did the right thing that night. I lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling and wondering why I let Julie drag me into this story. It was 9 in the morning when I woke up. Susan's side of the bed was empty. I put on sweatpants and went down the stairs to the kitchen. Susan was sitting alone at the table, and the coffee pot was half full. I'm sorry I slept so long. I see you found the coffee. Thanks, I need a cup. I didn't make the coffee. You just missed Julie and Kyle. They had just returned to the bedroom to take a shower. Together? Shit. Do you think we can tear these two apart? I told Kyle I was leaving in an hour, with or without him. He didn't take it very well, but I need to be at my parents' for brunch. It's their 30th anniversary. I grabbed the Sunday newspaper from the porch and went about my usual Sunday morning routine coffee and the sports page, and then the book review section. Susan sat across from me and read, or tried to pretend to read. At 11 o'clock, she got up from her chair and knocked on the bedroom door. Kyle, it's time. I'm leaving. Susan returned to the table, kissing the top of my head. Thank you for being such a gentleman. I'm sorry that everything turned out this way. It's a pity that you didn't have love. Me too. Wait, that didn't sound right. I don't regret that we didn't have a bed. Well, maybe I'm a little sorry because you're so gorgeous, but I'm sorry. Oh shit, it doesn't matter. Just at that moment, Kyle came into the room with a huge smile on his face that I wanted to erase. He slapped me on the back and said something as he headed for the front door. Did you and Susan have a good night? Once she starts, she turns into fireworks, right? And then he walked out the door. I went back to the guest bedroom and looked inside. Julie was asleep. Julie didn't get up until 5 that day. I spent the afternoon on the treadmill. I didn't count the laps, but I wouldn't be surprised if I ran at least a half marathon. On the way home, I bought some Thai food, enough for 2, in case Julie got up and got hungry. She was hungry. We sat down and ate. Julie was all playful. Did you and Susan have a good time last night? Kyle told me, as he put it, a real firecracker when she gets turned on. Actually, we didn't do anything last night. None of us were in the mood. Julia was sitting with chopsticks at the ready, her mouth open. You spent the whole night with this beautiful woman and you're telling me you didn't do anything? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. She said Kyle blamed it on her and she wasn't ready to switch. I wondered if Julie would catch the subtext of my statement. She didn't do it. Well, that's too bad. I'm sure you two would have had fun. What about you, Julie? Did you have fun with Kyle? It was a pleasure. We weren't in a hurry either. Basically, we got to know each other a little bit and probably hooked up a couple of times. Everything was fine. I wondered why Julie was downplaying the significance of this. So, does this mean that we're crossing Kyle and Susan off the list? Julie looked surprised by my statement. No, let's wait and see. Can we not talk about this anymore tonight? I hate to think that we have nothing more to discuss together. How was your run today? Okay, maybe I'm slow-witted, but not that stupid. On Monday morning, I called our company's lawyer and asked for a meeting with him and a family lawyer from his firm. Unfortunately, I had to fly to Seattle early on Tuesday morning, and our conflicting schedules meant that we wouldn't be able to meet until next Monday. I also asked for a recommendation from a private investigator. That afternoon, I was at the Rice Investigations office and met with Ronald Rice. I briefly explained to Mr. Rice everything I needed to know. He said they could start investigating by Wednesday and probably have something for me within a week. Here I have to take a step back and explain how a 29-year-old guy got a beautiful house with an area of 1,000 square meters with a swimming pool and his own business. My grandfather, my mother's father, left both the house and the business to me, his only grandson, when he died 2 years ago. I started working in my grandfather's machine shop when I was 16. After school, on weekends, on holidays. This may sound bad, but Grandpa always gave me free time for sports and dating. I studied at a local university with a degree in business and accounting. Grandpa always said that there are a bunch of guys with technical knowledge, but few of them can run a business. Money management is just as important as technical know-how if you want to run a successful business. Grandfather's will was well known. I would have inherited the house and most of the business. I met Julia when I was at a reception at one of the major manufacturers to whom we supply machined parts. She was one of the clerks in the purchasing department. I took a chance, noticing the absence of a ring on her left hand. I asked her out on a date. She said yes, and a month later we were a couple. 6 months later we were engaged. Then my father intervened. He asked my grandfather's law firm to draw up a prenuptial agreement protecting my future inheritance if we divorced within the first 25 years of marriage. Dad said he'd take the hit if my fiancé got mad at the prenuptial agreement. Julie didn't seem too upset by the conditions. She was madly in love with me. I remember exactly what she said. 25 years and that's it? I planned to be married to Samuel for at least 50 years. God, I loved that woman. Grandfather died 4 months after his 83rd birthday. I think he could have lived to be 100, but he was 32 years old when he was captured by the Japanese during World War II and spent 18 months in a prisoner of war camp in China. If you know anything about the conditions in the camps, you know how harsh they were for the prisoners. More than 30% of American prisoners of war in Japanese camps died in captivity, compared with 1% in German camps in the European theater of operations. Anyway, those months in captivity had damaged some of his internal organs, but he always claimed that he was one of the lucky ones. He returned home after the war and lived as long as he lived. Here I am, 29 years old, with a wife, a house, and a great business. But even after 2 years, I missed my grandfather every morning when I went into the workshop. Dinner with Julie on Monday evening was quiet. We did make love that night because I won't be back until Friday. If you're wondering why I left town when my marriage was hanging in the balance, the answer is simple. My company needed this contract with an aerospace company from Seattle, which supplies Boeing. Without this contract, I might have had to lay off a couple of employees. I was hoping that my marriage would last, but I needed this contract. I kissed Julie goodbye on Tuesday morning and told her that I loved her. She thanked me for making love to her last night and said how nice it was. She hugged me and said she loved me more than ever. I felt almost human again when I jumped into a taxi. As usual, Julie and I talked on the phone every night while I was on the road. During a conversation on Thursday evening, I got a jolt. It was a good day and I was in a great mood. The terms were agreed earlier in the day, and the contract will be signed tomorrow morning. Not only will everyone at the factory have jobs for the next 2 years, but I may have to hire an additional machinist. Life was good, and then everything went wrong. Julie's voice trembled with excitement as we chatted. I thought it was because of my news, but it seemed like something else was more exciting. Guess what, Sam? I talked to Kyle today, and he explained why Susan was so reluctant to change last Saturday. They have discussed everything, and Susan agrees to this Saturday. Isn't that wonderful? Wait, Julie, you mean they'll come again on Saturday? I'm not too thrilled about it. I've been out of town for 3 days, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with you. I'll take care of you on Friday when you get home, Sam. Don't worry, you'll be a happy tourist when I'm done with you. In my defense, it was a long 2 days of negotiations with 3 vice presidents, and I didn't have the energy to argue with Julie on the phone. I hadn't eaten much all day, and it was 7 in the evening on the West Coast. I told Julie I'd see her tomorrow. I need to eat. She told me once again how much she loves me before we hung up. I was told that the steaks at Metropolitan Grill in Seattle are as delicious as anywhere in the USA, but I don't remember much about the filet I ordered that evening. There was bourbon, I remember that. Friday. I needed to focus and be attentive. The contract was amended at the last minute. Nothing unusual for such a large order. This meant that I had to switch from an hour-long flight to a 5-hour flight. There was 1 seat left on the 5 o'clock flight, and it was in first class, but I booked it. We spent the morning sorting out the last details, had lunch in the conference room, and at 2:30 I was on my way to the airport. When it rains, it pours like a bucket, literally. Seattle may be used to an abundance of rain, but thunderstorms are a completely different matter. My flight was delayed, and then delayed again. We finally taxied onto the runway at 9 in the evening. After a 5-hour flight and with a 3-hour time difference, the plane landed at Metropolitan Wayne Airport at 5 in the morning. The taxi pulled up at my door at 6, and I went straight to bed. Julie woke up just enough to kiss me, and then we both fell asleep. When I called Julie last night, she was watching crappy TV, and she always had trouble sleeping when I was out of town, so I guess she didn't sleep most of the night. When I woke up, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Julie wasn't at home, but there was a note. Sam, I'm at the spa. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I go for a massage, hair coloring and cutting and everything else. She should be home by 5. I hope you got some rest. Love you, Julie. I knew better than to try to get through. Julie turns off her phone while she's at the spa. And no, I've never worried that Julie used that time to get away from me, even this afternoon. If you saw how she looked every time she came home from the spa, you'd know that 3 hours and $300 is a bargain. Julie flew into the house at 5 minutes to 5. You look great, baby. How about we go out for dinner tonight? Julie hugged me tightly and kissed me even harder. What are you talking about, Sam? The Taylors will be here in half an hour. Wait a minute. You mean they're still coming? I assumed that you would cancel the meeting since we spent no more than half an hour together and have not slept since Tuesday morning. It would be rude to cancel the meeting at the last minute. I'm sorry, I thought we talked about this on Thursday, how Susan can't wait to make it up to you. I got angry. Is that why you spent the day at the spa? To get ready for Kyle? Of course not, silly. We have a Kaufman wedding tomorrow afternoon. You know how all these women are. They'll tear me to pieces if I don't show up at my best. Now hurry up and shave. The Taylors will be here soon. By the time I finished shaving, the doorbell rang. By the time I got to the front door, Kyle and Susan were already in the house, and Kyle had his arm around Julie's waist. He picked her up from the floor, staring at her intently. Damn it, you look great today. Then he looked at me, put Julie down, and held out his hand. Sam, I guarantee you and Susan will have a ball tonight. He laughed at his own stupid joke, not noticing that I refused to shake his hand. Julie intervened. I have several cans of beer cooling in the guest room. We all know why we're here tonight. There is no need to waste time. She took Kyle's hand and headed for the bedroom. I looked at Susan. She lowered her eyes. Sam, let's go to bed. Susan headed up the stairs to the master bedroom. I went to the kitchen and got a bottle of wine, 2 glasses and 2 pears. By the time I entered the master bedroom, Susan was undressed and lying under a blanket. I poured the wine and cut a few slices of pear with my penknife. What made you change your mind, Susan? Why such a sudden desire to make love to me? I'm not going to lie to you, Sam. I haven't changed my mind. Kyle told me it was part of the deal. If I hadn't made love to you, you would have stopped letting us come. Don't get me wrong, Sam. I think you're a very attractive man and a real gentleman, but making love to a man I'm not in love with is not who I am. Please, let's go to bed, and let's just do it. No, I think we are both who we are. We're not going to make love just because our spouses want us to. Let's have some wine and watch TV. And that's exactly what we were doing until Susan fell asleep around midnight. An hour later, I got up and went down to the kitchen for a stronger drink. I was pouring myself a glass of bourbon when I looked out the back window. In the moonlight, I could make out 2 people in the pool. They were hugging in the shallow water. Judging by their movements, they were making love. I wasn't going to watch them, but it was as my friend once told me. He was skiing when he stopped, looked up and saw a man rolling down the slope, apparently out of control. My friend said he didn't want to watch. The man was heading straight for the grove of trees. The man crashed into more than one tree, and my friend still couldn't turn his head or close his eyes. My friend started crying when he told this story. It was 10 years after the event. That day I saw a man die and I couldn't look away. I couldn't either. Kyle and Julie chose this moment to get out of the pool. Julie looked amazing as she climbed the steps of the pool, Kyle walking right behind her with a pole sticking out. Kyle was sitting on one of the deck chairs, and Julie was kneeling in front of him. He turned to face me, but I knew he couldn't see me inside the house. There was an expression of gloating on his face. He liked trying to hurt her. I expected Julie to sit down and curse the bastard, but she only reacted to his pressure by putting her hands on his ass. He lifted her head. Julie didn't have Susan's aversion to taking it to the end. Fortunately, I didn't eat anything solid all day except half a pear. I flushed the vomit down the drain and headed back to the bedroom, pouring myself a second glass of bourbon. It dawned on me when I looked at Susan sleeping on the other side of the bed. I pulled back the blanket and lifted the sleeve of the t-shirt she was wearing. I've seen it before, but I didn't pay attention. There was a large black and blue bruise on the upper part of Susan's left arm. I didn't wake her up, but I put a note on the bedroom door so she could see it before she left the room. Susan, it's important. Wake me up. It was early Sunday when Susan woke me up. Sam, what is it? Why do you want me to wake you up so early? I looked into Susan's eyes. Where did you get that bruise on your arm? Susan looked scared. I bumped into the door. I'm so clumsy. Why did you ask? I don't need this nonsense about crashed into the door. How? Tell me the truth. I lowered my voice. She still looked scared, but this time she answered me. Kyle did it. He was upset when I told him that you and I didn't have a bed last weekend. He said if I didn't do it this time, he would break my ribs again. Did he break your ribs? When? Last year, when we had a fight. He doesn't hit me often, but sometimes when he's really angry, he gets a little carried away. Susan, breaking ribs doesn't mean getting a little carried away. Have you thought about going to the police? I never knew, or at least never knew for sure what a battered spouse was, but I watched enough Life movies with Julie to understand everything Susan said over the next 10 minutes. All the excuses for her husband's abuse. All the reasons why she couldn't leave him. All the reasons why she refused to admit the truth when the police questioned her last year. Susan was talking and I was listening, not trying to argue with her. Susan, don't worry. I'm going to tell Julie and Kyle that we had love last night. You should say the same thing. Tell Kyle we've had this twice. Remember, twice. Tell him I was a gentleman and it was nice. Not great or anything like that, just cute. We need our stories to be true, but we can't let Kyle be jealous. If Julie and Kyle want to be together again next weekend, agree. Don't act like you can't wait for it, just tell him it's okay. Do you understand? I didn't tell Susan what I actually planned for the coming week. I didn't trust her enough that she wouldn't talk if Kyle was rude to her. Maybe he wouldn't have hit her again if he didn't think she was hiding something. When Julie and Kyle came into the kitchen later that morning, I played a game. Kyle, you were right. Susan and I had a fantastic night. She's the firecracker you promised. The look on Julie and Kyle's faces almost made me sick again. Kyle and Susan left soon after. Julie and I went to the Kaufman's wedding and reception, acting like the couple in love that everyone expected to see. Julie hinted while we were dancing that I could expect some action when we got home, but by the time we walked through the door, I told her I was too tired. I think she felt relieved. She was probably still in pain from last night. Monday will be a long day. I held a short meeting at work, assigning tasks to each of the managers of my company to prepare for a new job. At 10:30, I was outside the door. Meeting Ronald Rice opened my eyes. Here's what I learned. Kyle Taylor was a sales representative for a company that did business with Julie's company. They must have known each other well before Julie brought up the exchange with another couple. The advertisement in the newspaper was a ploy to hide the obvious intended result. Kyle Taylor had a history of run-ins with the law. One of the reasons he would never have progressed beyond a sales representative was his criminal record. One conviction for battery and a felony for assault when he beat up some guy in a bar fight. Kyle was lucky to have a job, even though both sentences were handed down more than 6 years ago. He was investigated for allegations of domestic violence, but his wife, Susan, did not press charges, and he was released. By now, I wasn't too stunned to learn that Julie and Kyle had a long lunch last Thursday at the hotel. The more I heard, the more I wondered how Julie, whom I thought was a pretty smart woman, got involved with such a snake. Did she have any idea who she was making love to? My meeting with the lawyers that day set everything in motion. Both lawyers listened to the chain of events leading up to today. They were glad that I didn't have sex with Susan, but I noticed something in the way they looked at each other that made me uneasy. What? It would be very helpful if you could somehow get Julie to confirm that the exchange was her idea, that you never said yes to that. It would also be helpful if we could get a statement from Susan confirming that nothing ever happened. My lawyers and I discussed the prenuptial agreement and the expected terms of the divorce. According to the prenuptial agreement, my home and business were safe. I will probably end up splitting half of the other assets accumulated after the wedding. This, of course, hurt me, but I was determined to end this marriage as soon as possible. A new contract for the plant would take up a lot of time over the next few months, and I couldn't let this contract fall through. It was easy to get Julie to open up on Monday night. She admitted that the idea of the exchange was her initiative. I decided that I needed to do something else. Get Susan out from under Kyle's heel. I would need Ronald Rice again for that. Separating Susan from Kyle turned out to be easier than expected. With Rice's help, we played on Kyle's two biggest vices, his overwhelming ego and violent tendencies. I called Kyle and asked him to meet me at a bar on the pretext that I needed to understand his secret recipe for how to make my wife enjoy love. I acted like a stupid cuckold on the phone. I told him that Julie just hasn't enjoyed sleeping with me since we started exchanging. What was his secret? Kyle couldn't help but swallow my words of sorrow because of his excellent lovemaking. The fool agreed to sit with me and share his knowledge about women. On Wednesday, we met and sat at a table in a bar. I listened to Kyle talk about his technique. Of course, he couldn't help but brag about the fact that few people had his equipment. He rubbed it in, pretending to sympathize with the fact that men like me can't compete when it comes to pleasing a woman. All this time, I kept buying drinks. Kyle must have drunk 4 beers and 4 whiskeys in the hour and a half we were sitting there. I thanked Kyle and told him it was time for me to leave, but asked the bartender to bring Kyle one last beer before I left. Just a thank you for your help. Kyle was a little depressed when I walked out the door. I wasn't there when the second part of Kyle's ambush happened, but Rice told me the next day that it couldn't have been better. One of Ron Rice's partners, a certain John Henson, leaned over the back of the booth and quietly said that Kyle was a complete shit. What he knew for sure from Kyle's wife was that Kyle was lousy in bed, even on the few occasions when he managed to do it. Obviously, it was all crap, but Kyle was too drunk to figure it out, and when Henson walked past Kyle with his back to him, Kyle swung at him. Henson was ready for this and just got hit in the ear. He gave a great impression of an NBA star plopping down on the ground and splitting his skull with a hidden razor blade. Blood was pouring. Henson was screaming, and the bartender and 2 customers called 911, while Kyle was subdued by 2 other customers. $3,000 were well spent, including the $1,500 that Henson received for his role in the play. The cops showed up. Kyle was arrested and charged with assault and battery. As a result, he had to serve 2 years. His public defender asked for a suspended sentence, but given Kyle's past convictions, the judge sent him to jail. It would be embarrassing for me to frame him, But any man who beats his wife deserves to be sent to prison. 2 years seemed like a lenient sentence considering what he had done to Susan, but at least he was gone and Susan was safe for now. One of my lawyer's partners was directed and helped Susan contact the women's support group for abused spouses. I also asked my friend, who had a small business, to offer Susan a job. It was just an entry-level position, but it helped Susan transform from an abused wife into an independent, divorced woman. As for Julie, things quickly got off the ground on Friday. After meeting with my personal banker, transferring some money, and closing several joint credit card accounts, Julie was served on Friday evening when she returned home from work. I decided not to serve Julie at work, although it would be nice to embarrass her in this way. My lawyer advised me to remain calm until a settlement agreement is reached. I followed his advice, and in the long run it turned out to be a reasonable decision from a financial point of view. The locks have been replaced. Julie was met at the door by a representative of my lawyer and handed a package of divorce papers. Before Julie could open the bag, I called her into the dining room. "What is it, Sam?" she asked, holding the bag in her hands. "These are the divorce papers, Julie. Sit down for a second." Julie just stared at me when she sat down. "Julie, I know that you gave me this whole swinging farce so that you could use that asshole Kyle so that I wouldn't know that I was framed. I know that you two knew each other before all this started. I know you met with him last week while I was out of town. I'm not going to stay married to a liar and a cheater." Julia resisted. "But you used Susan. Don't play Mr. Tall and Powerful with me. I've never touched Susan. We told Kyle this lie just so she wouldn't get beaten up again. You didn't know that. At least I hope you didn't know that. Kyle beat Susan up after the first weekend when she and I didn't fulfill your agreement. We had to pretend for the second weekend for her sake. It doesn't matter now. Your little friend is in jail. Most likely, he will stay there for some time. I sure as hell hope you don't do something stupid. For example, you'll bail him out. If you do, I'll make sure to change the financial agreement in the divorce." Julie spent the next half hour trying to convince me that we loved each other, that we could forget about it and start our family. She even tried this nonsense like, it was just a bed. I kept my cool. It was hard not to yell at her for ruining our marriage and baffling my love for her. It was late, and I was paying the lawyer, who was sitting in the living room, by the hour. I ended the conversation and told Julie to pack up some personal belongings so she could find a place to live while the courts sort out the details of our divorce. Julie had her own credit card and access to a checking account that still had several $1,000s in it, so she wouldn't spend the night on the street. It's a pity, but the law doesn't work that way. My phone rang 5 or 6 times that night after she left, until I decided to turn off the phone and try to get some sleep. When I turned on my phone the next morning, there were just as many messages and even more text messages from Julie on my voicemail. It wasn't fun or easy. I had a good divorce lawyer who looked after my financial interests, but nothing filled the giant hole in my heart. There were times when I almost stopped the divorce, thinking that I should give Julie another chance. But each time I remembered her lying actions and realized that I would never be able to trust her again. During the divorce process, Julie's lawyer tried to claim that I was also guilty because I was making love to Susan. Susan's testimony claimed otherwise, but her lawyer continued to make a big deal out of a molehill until Susan and I offered to take lie detector tests. This silenced him. My recording of Julie's confession that she tricked me into an arrangement was never entered into the record, but the judge listened to the transcript anyway before ruling that it was unacceptable. How can you not hear and forget something? I'm sure it had something to do with the final decision, which was fair, but much less than what Julie's lawyer was trying to achieve. During all this divorce bullshit, I was doing what too many cheating husbands do. I got drunk a lot. My health and my relationships with friends and family have suffered. Fortunately, during the working day while I was busy with important things, I could keep myself in control. But after the end of the working day, everything returned to the bottle. You see, the thing is, Julie is the kind of wife who will sit next to you on the couch and watch the Lions, even when the Lions had a bad season. She saw that my beer was almost empty, got up and got me another long neck, and not this light beer shit, but real beer. How many wives will go to a dozen Tigers games every season, wearing an Al Kaline t-shirt? These are just a few more reasons why I will miss her. But a lie? I couldn't get past it, so I drank to forget myself. Until the day of the intervention. It was about a month after the divorce was finalized. My father and my best friend showed up at my house one beautiful Saturday morning. They kicked out the girl I picked up the night before. Despite the anvil pounding in my skull, they forced me to take a shower, get dressed, and take me to breakfast. This was the beginning of my recovery. My friends took turns supporting me in sobriety and on the road to recovery. 3 months later, I had a 10 kilometers race planned for charity purposes. Running led to the next chapter of my life because that's how I met Deborah. We both ran on the school track. The soft running pillow relieved the load from my limbs a little, since now I was running up to 10 kilometers 4 days a week, and I couldn't help but pay attention to a pretty and athletic woman with a long blonde French braid. I've seen her a few times before, mostly on weekends. She was friendly enough to smile back at my good morning as we passed by. I also noticed that she was paying close attention to a 5 or 6-year-old girl who was either drawing in a coloring book while sitting in the stands or running around the site. One Saturday morning, I decided to take a chance and introduce myself when a pretty woman stopped and started warming up after a run. I stopped next to her, held out my hand, and told her my name. Of course, this could happen in 2 ways. She could have ignored my attempt at friendship or shaken my hand and told me her name. She opened door number 2. "Hi, I'm Deborah. Nice to meet you, Sam. I've seen you here before. You always seem to be focused on your run, so I never bothered you." I looked into her big brown eyes, happy that she had decided to accept my greeting. And I try not to molest the women who train here. I suppose it's hard enough to be an attractive woman without guys hitting on you everywhere you go. But I decided to take a giant leap of faith and ask if I could buy you a cup of coffee. "I would love to have a cup, but I'm here with my daughter." "Well, if you want, introduce me and take her with you. The cafe has hot chocolate and other treats for children." During this exchange, I noticed that the little girl was watching us with interest. "I'm sorry, Deborah, before we continue, I noticed that you're not wearing an engagement ring. Please tell me you're not married. I would never approach a married woman." "No, I'm not married, and I've never been. My daughter's father ran away a few months after I told him I was carrying his child. He wasn't ready to be a father or a husband. I'm raising Linda alone." By this time, a little girl was standing next to us, and I was introduced to Linda. Linda greeted me politely and seemed pleased with my offer to treat her to hot chocolate. We took our bags for training. Linda grabbed her coloring supplies, and the 3 of us went to a local coffee shop a block down the street. When we were sitting in that coffee shop, little Linda was enjoying hot chocolate with a smile on her face. Deborah and I were having a small talk over a cup of coffee. I felt something, but I couldn't describe it. It took almost a year before I realized how I felt at that moment. At that time, I was too engrossed in having fun with these 2 charming ladies to attach much importance to it. My affair with Deborah began that Saturday morning. Talking over a cup of coffee, we planned to have a real date next weekend, and everything turned out as well as possible. Deborah and I had a lot in common: music, movies, politics. Over the next 2 months, we spent at least one weekend evening together. Linda was with one of her 2 grandparents or with a babysitter. I tried to include Linda in our plans for at least one day every weekend. It seemed that the little girl accepted me and took a liking to me. From time to time, I spent a weekday evening having dinner at their house. Deborah and I took our time, but eventually became close after a few months of dating. It was during one of the weekends when Linda was with her father's parents. The father may have disappeared, but his parents were delighted with the appearance of their granddaughter. Deborah and I decided to spend the weekend in Chicago. I gave it my all: 2 adjoining rooms at Palmer House, tickets to the symphony orchestra at CSO, steaks at Ditka's. Unfortunately, Iron Mike wasn't there that night. All in all, a great Saturday night. It turns out that the second room was superfluous. I kissed Deborah goodnight at the door to her room, and 2 minutes after I entered my room, the adjoining door opened and Deborah appeared on the threshold, dressed in an animal print nightgown. I was already naked, and this nightgown didn't stay on Deborah's body for more than a minute after I hugged her and started kissing her. I unwrapped Deborah and put her on the bed. "It's awfully bright in here, Sam," she said. I got up and turned off one of the lamps but left the bathroom light on. "I hope you don't mind, but I want to see it." Deborah looked a little embarrassed by this, but she didn't complain. I went back to making love to this woman. After about 15 minutes of foreplay, I couldn't hold back any longer and got down on my knees to enter her. Deborah was wet enough to let me in. I watched her eyes as I moved forward. Deborah's body reacted and she leaned toward me until I filled her. What I had to get used to was Deborah's quiet restraint when we made love. Although Julie was never a screamer, Deborah hardly said a word, She grabbed my shoulders or dug her heels into my ass to let me know her intentions. We made love at least twice more that night, and again the next morning before checking out and going home. A few days after returning from our weekend in Chicago, I was sitting in my home office considering a buyout offer for a larger company based in Birmingham, Alabama. The doorbell rang, and who should be standing on the threshold but my ex-wife. "Sam, can we talk?" I knew what it would lead to, but I let her in anyway. An old song started playing in my head. My mom used to sing it sometimes while cooking in the kitchen, and there was a line, "Don't you think you always don't know what you have until you lose it?" I listened as Julie tried to convince me to let her stay the night. Deep down, she just knew that if we made love again, it would convince me that we were made for each other. Julie's outfit exuded seduction. A thin blouse that barely concealed her fantastic breasts, a short skirt that accentuated the long, slender legs with which she usually wrapped around my waist. Her makeup was lightly applied, as she knew I liked it. Julie was perfect. After Julie left, I grabbed the keys and drove to Deborah's house. It wasn't too late, but Linda should have gone to bed by now, and I needed to talk to Deborah without interruption. Deborah looked at me curiously when she opened the door. I immediately started talking. "Deborah, my ex-wife, came to my house this evening. She wanted to sleep with me to convince me that she and I should be together again." Before I could catch my breath and continue, Deborah interrupted me, giving me a look like her best friend had just died. "Oh, Sam, you didn't do that?" "No, wait. I told Julie that I was single and kicked her out of the house. I'm ashamed of only one thing. I told my ex-wife that I love you before I told you. I rushed here as soon as I closed the door behind her to tell you that I love you, Deborah Jones, and that you've made me the happiest guy I know." Those must have been the right words because I was pinned against the wall with Deborah's lips on my lips. That night, Deborah and I made love in her bed. Her eyes never left mine the whole time I was inside her. No woman has ever felt better in my naked arms. The offer from the Alabama company was very good. I met with their president. He reminded me of a younger version of my grandfather. I am a decent businessman who wanted to expand his company to compete with some of the big players in our business field. Since I owned a controlling stake in our company, I could make a decision on my own, but I made an offer to my parents, who owned 15%, and our 12 employees, who owned another 18%. After reviewing the offer and hearing about the need for the acquiring company not only to keep the plant in Michigan, but also to expand here, everyone agreed to a buyout. I agreed to stay for at least a year to lead the transition and train my deputy as director of the plant. We negotiated for the next 2 months. On the morning when I had to sign the last papers, I got up early, poured 2 cups of hot coffee, bought 2 jelly rolls at the diner, and drove to the church cemetery. I put 1 coffee and 1 bun on my grandfather's tombstone and spread out my chaise longue to sit for a while. "What do you think, Grandpa? Am I doing the right thing? You've spent 25 years building this business and now I'm selling it. I wish you were here to give me directions like you've been doing all these years." I admit I was looking for some kind of sign from above, anything that would help me get rid of the guilt I felt about missing out on such a precious gift. Of course, all the logical T were crossed out and the dots were placed above the I. The sale made sense. All the staff agreed with this decision, but my heart did not agree with it. I sat for another half hour finishing my coffee and bun, waiting for the sun to rise over the eastern sky, hoping that some plant or animal or whatever will do something mystical. Nothing. There is a wise owl sitting in a nearby tree and making a sound that I could interpret as a sign. Nothing. I folded the chaise longue and headed for the car. I went to the lawyer's office and signed the papers. I felt like shit, despite the smiles of everyone else at the negotiating table. On the other hand, my personal life couldn't have turned out better if I had starred in the movie Hallmark. I had a loving relationship with a beautiful woman inside and out. Almost a year after the night I confessed my love on Julie's porch, Julie and I were engaged, and that's when the relationship between Linda and me started to get strained. At the time Deborah and I were dating, and up to that point, Linda spent at least 1 weekend a month with her father's parents. I was usually at Deborah's house when Linda showed up on Sunday afternoon, and we never noticed any negativity after Linda returned home. But Linda's attitude changed shortly after Deborah and I announced our engagement. Suddenly, Linda started behaving differently towards me. Linda's paternal grandparents asked if Linda could spend more time with them, and Deborah kindly agreed. Now Linda visited their house at least twice a month. The first clear sign that there is no mistake about it, something was wrong, appeared 2 months before the wedding. I asked Linda if she would take her empty plate to the sink after dinner. Her answer was, "You're not my father and you can't tell me what to do." Linda ran out of the room. Deborah and I looked at each other. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "I don't know. Let me check on her." That was Deborah's response before getting up from the table. I sat there for 10 minutes or more before I realized that Deborah wasn't coming back to finish the meal. I cleared the table, including Linda's plate. I put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher, the leftovers in the refrigerator, and Deborah was still not there. I walked down the hall and knocked gently on Linda's bedroom door. Deborah opened the door, went out into the hall, and told me she wouldn't be long. That Linda is very upset. Should I just leave? Probably. I'll call you tomorrow. I'm going to spend the night trying to figure it all out. I left, went for a drink at Miller's Tavern, and then headed home. The relationship between Linda and me has not improved. In fact, they were slowly getting worse. I was at a loss to figure out a way to reconnect with Linda. I even read a couple of books about foster children and talked to a therapist. Sometimes what I tried seemed to get us back on track, but not for long. It was 1 step forward and 2 steps back. We were a month away from our wedding when we also found out that Linda's father, Nathan Miles, had returned to the city and was living with his parents. Here's a guy who ran away when his girlfriend was 4 months pregnant, saw his daughter a total of 3 times in the first 7 years of her life, never paid a penny of child support, and suddenly we hear hints of parental rights from Nathan's parents. Throughout this 3-month period, right up to the week before the wedding, Deborah tried her best to play the role of arbiter. She tried many ways to improve the relationship between Linda and me. Unfortunately, Deborah saw everything through the eyes of a single mother who was fully responsible for the well-being and upbringing of her child. She was clearly biased towards Linda when it came to who should do what to make the relationship work. That's why I read these books and talked to a therapist. The situation reached a climax the weekend before our wedding. I was sitting in Murphy's drinking a bottle of beer when Nathan Miles came through the door. I had only met this asshole once before when he gave Linda a ride after one of his visits to her grandparents. Nathan stood next to me and started. "Listen, you bastard. You're not going to take on the role of daddy for my little girl. Her mother has no fucking right to let you be her daddy. I won't let that happen." I turned in my chair to look him straight in the eye, but before I could say anything, Ed, the bartender, came over and asked him to watch his tongue. There were other people in the bar. He also warned the two of us to be quiet and not rude. Ed's words calmed me down a bit, and I softened my response to Nathan. "Look, I'm not going to try to take on your role as Linda's father, but it means you have to become a father. You can't be her father if you're only going to see her once every couple of years, or if you call her mother obscene names. It doesn't work that way." Nathan's response to my attempt to be polite was not at all what I expected. He screamed, "Fuck you. I will raise my daughter the way I want," grabbed my beer bottle and hit me on the head with it. Here's the thing. I've never taken martial arts lessons, I've never served in the army or as a secret agent, and I've never carried a gun in my life. But I have a very firm head, and I'm lucky that my father taught me how to defend myself and respond if I get into a fight. For probably the 3rd time in my life, I applied what my father taught me to Nathan. Before he realized what had happened, my fist hit him in the nose, Dad's lesson number 1. My foot hit him in the balls, lesson 2. My other foot landed on his instep, lesson 3. Lessons 4 through 10 took half a minute while Nathan was on the ground. Lessons 4 through 10 never let them back down. The ambulance and the police arrived at the same time. I was incredibly lucky. 2 other patrons heard my restrained verbal response to Nathan's initial outburst, and at least 5 patrons saw Nathan hit me with a beer bottle as a provocation so that I would beat the crap out of him. The blood flowing from my scalp only confirmed their testimony. What an irony if you think about it. Blood from the head and all that, although it was a different bar than the one where we trapped Kyle. On Friday evening, I spent more than 4 hours in the emergency room of the hospital. Leaving the hospital early on Saturday morning, I was trying to figure out how I was going to turn the left side of my head towards the camera during the wedding shots. My left side of my head was shaved for 6 stitches, which were done by a doctor. I didn't have to worry. I won the battle, but I lost the war. On Saturday afternoon, I knocked on Deborah's front door. She opened the door and Linda was standing behind her. Linda started yelling at me, I hate you, you tried to kill my dad." Deborah stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. "Linda is very upset right now. Nathan's parents picked her up earlier and took her to visit her father at the hospital. They said you tried to kill him. I know that's not true, but he's pretty badly hurt. Look, Deborah, I didn't start the fight. Just look at my head. He hit me with a beer bottle without any warning. He just took a bottle and hit me on the head. I'm sorry, Sam. Why would he do that? What provoked him? He said that I tried to steal his daughter. I explained that there was nothing like that. He hit me for nothing. All I did was defend myself. I believe you, Sam, but I have a little girl who is injured now after she visited her father in the hospital. I think we should postpone the wedding until I can calm Linda down. What could I say? No, you have to marry me next week, even if your daughter cries and screams during the ceremony. I nodded my head, told Deborah I'd call her later, and then turned around and went home. I did call Deborah. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and every day for the next 2 weeks. She hung up on the phone for a while, promised to meet soon, and then hung up to take care of my daughter or something like that. 2 weeks later, I told her that we needed to talk. Deborah arranged for her parents to look after Linda, and we met at a nice cafe down the street from her house. It didn't go very well. Sam, it's not getting any better. Linda flatly refuses when I ask her to invite you to dinner. She keeps saying that you tried to kill Nathan. Did you tell her that he hit me first? Yes, but it doesn't make sense. She refuses to listen to me. Nathan's parents won't let her forget that it was Nathan who ended up in the hospital. I think we're going to have to put off any talk of marriage for a while. Marriage? Damn it, Deborah, we're not even dating anymore. We were supposed to get married last weekend, and this is the first time I've seen you in 2 weeks. And even then you say you need to pick up Linda in an hour. Okay, we'll postpone the engagement, but give me back the ring. When you and Linda decide that I can be in your life again, just call me and I'll put it on your finger again. I know I've been acting like a jerk, but damn it, I didn't start this shit. And Deborah let Nathan, his parents, and Linda control our lives. Nathan appeared in Linda's life less than 2 months ago and he's in charge? I needed Deborah to see this. Deborah burst into tears and took off the ring, reluctantly giving it to me. Deborah, I love you. This ring is yours, but not before you can get Nathan and his parents out of Linda's life and out of our lives. We need to be a family. That's what we've been saying from the beginning, at least 2 weeks ago. In the end, Deborah and I drifted apart. For the next couple of months, we met from time to time, but I was never allowed to return to her house, fearing that Linda would react violently to my presence. When an old friend of mine called me from the West Coast and asked me to join him at a startup in Portland, I accepted the offer and planned to leave my hometown. My year of work at the acquiring company has passed. It was a good time for a new life. When I was packing my things, I found a picture of Deborah, Linda, and me. When I looked at the photo of the happy trio, I remembered that first day in the cafe, and it dawned on me. The feeling I had that day when the three of us sat together for the first time. What I felt was the influence of other cafe patrons. They saw how happy we were at that moment and smiled at what seemed like a strange family scene. I've only seen Deborah once since I moved to Portland. I returned to the city to visit friends 5 years later when I ran into her at a local park. Deborah was walking behind a stroller with a small child inside. Deborah still looked good, but sad. I didn't avoid her when I saw her coming down the path towards me. We said hello. I looked into the stroller and praised her for the beautiful baby. It's not mine, Sam. It's my sister's. I've never had another relationship since our breakup. It's just Linda and me. What happened to Nathan? He left town about 4 months after you left. Linda still spends time with his parents, but Nathan probably saw her twice before he died 2 years ago. That's probably a good thing. He would most likely have done something else to ruin her life, as he ruined ours. Did Linda ever admit her role in our breakup after she saw her daddy leave again? Linda was the center of my world before you came into my life, and then again after you left. I spoil her. That's my life. Tears welled up in Deborah's eyes, and at that moment I had to leave. I was tempted to say something stupid like, live your life. But I didn't say anything. What a waste. So let's go back to the moment when Deborah and I broke off our engagement and I moved to Portland. Here I was, 32 years old. 1 failed marriage, 1 broken engagement, and my heart was broken again. The distance from my hometown and all the reminders of failed love affairs would be good for me. There was one positive aspect to my miserable life. The business startup that my friend invited me to join was a brewery. Kevin Daniels, whom I met in college and with whom we spent many evenings over a beer or two, decided to start a microbrewery. It turned out that he had a talent for making exceptional ale, but had no real business experience. So he called me and offered to join him. I would do business and he would brew beer and manage the kitchen. We made a good team. The talents complemented each other and our business grew and flourished. Within 3 years, we opened a second branch. We made 6-figure profits and in addition, invested more money in the business. My personal life sucked. I've dated some women and slept with a few of them. Overall, life was good. Not great, but good. Then I met Gwen. Gwen was an unmarried woman, the only single woman at the dinner party hosted by Kevin and his wife Sally. It was another obvious attempt by Sally to help me find someone to share my life with. It was obvious to Gwen too, and the two of us had a little fun. During dinner, we had a few minutes to talk, and I discovered that Gwen is an intelligent woman with a beautiful smile and a good figure to boot. Right after dessert, Gwen said it was time for her to go home. I asked her if I could call her sometime and set up a date. She said yes, but I wanted to warn her a little bit because she will need to hire a babysitter for her 2 children. Needless to say, I didn't call. About a week after the dinner party, Sally came into the pub and my booth. Sally looked angry. "I thought you were going to call Gwen and ask her out. She said she hasn't heard a sound from you, and I think she's very offended." I really liked Sally, and I certainly didn't want my partner's wife to be mad at me, so I answered her as politely as I could, actually. "Sally, Gwen has children. You know my story with Deborah. Do you think I need to get involved with another woman just so that her kids ruin everything again?" "No thanks." Sally stared at me for a moment. "Wow, I didn't even think about it. I'm sorry. I just thought you two seemed to get along last Saturday. I forgot about Deborah and what happened. Apologies accepted. If you talk to Gwen, please tell her that I think she's beautiful and smart. Please tell her that I'm sorry if I cheated on her. If necessary, tell her why I won't call her." "All right, Sam. I'll take care of it. Sorry." Sally came out of my booth and I went back to my beer. 2 days later, I looked up from my desk and saw Gwen. She was even more beautiful than I remembered from that Saturday night dinner. "Hi, Sam. Can I come in? When will I learn?" I got up and invited her in, closed the door to my office, and pulled up a chair for her to sit down. She was wearing a mid-thigh skirt, and her legs were longer than I remembered. Her white blouse contrasted pleasantly with her dark complexion. Then I noticed her eyes, light brown with green flecks. I don't remember ever seeing eyes like that before. Her dark hair fell just below her shoulders. I had to focus on her words because I was half drunk looking at this beautiful woman. "Sam, Sally told me why you didn't call. It is quite understandable why you are afraid of children after such an experience. But I'm not that other woman. And I think if you met my 2 children, you'd see that they're different too. What about their father?" "Their father lives across the river in Vancouver. He sees them twice a month and for about a month in the summer. He had a new family, which, as it happened, turned out to be my ex-best friend, whom he accidentally fell in love with and she got knocked up. Now they have 2 children of their own." It's pretty lousy. Isn't it terrible when you discover that your loving spouse is getting it somewhere else? What's next? "I thought Sally said you broke up before the wedding." "Sally didn't tell you, but I was married before the Deborah fiasco. My wife decided she needed a little more and we divorced. But let's get back to your situation. So, the ex won't pull any tricks if we start dating?" "I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but let's just say that if I get married again, his alimony will disappear, although he will continue to pay child support. He keeps asking me when I'm going to find an asshole man. Now I've probably scared you off by talking like that. Sam, it was nice to meet you, and I'd love it if you'd come over next week and have dinner with me and the kids. Just a nice, casual dinner. Is there anything I can cook to bribe you?" "Anything but what we serve here in the pub. As a result, I eat here 5 or 6 days a week. Are you familiar with Italian cuisine? I have my mom's lasagna recipe. I could make it with garlic bread." "Lasagna? Really? What evening is it?" Gwen smiled. I could get used to that smile. I showed up the following Tuesday with a bottle of Chianti and a small bouquet of flowers. I met Jake, aged 7, and Robin, aged 5, 2 very nice, very polite children. There was still half an hour left before dinner was ready. Jake asked me if we could play ball before dinner. "I didn't bring a glove, Jake. You could take one of Dad's." He left a couple here. I looked at Gwen. "A couple?" Matt played for the Portland Sea Dogs reserve team. That's where I met him. It's a long story that we can talk about when the kids aren't here. It seemed to me that a slight blush appeared on Gwen's face as she told this. Jake grabbed 2 mittens and we headed out to the backyard. The kid had great hands and could catch, which surprised me since he was only 7 years old. After 20 minutes of this, Gwen and Robin came out and watched for a few minutes before inviting us to dinner. The smile in Gwen's eyes as she watched us pulled me closer to the whirlpool. It was the second month after Gwen and I started dating. I was invited to accompany Gwen and the kids to a barbecue for Jake's Little League team before the start of the season, a kind of get-together organized by the coach to get parents involved before the start of the season, the first training session. Most likely, it was an attempt by the coach to convince parents to participate in his program, including convincing the parents of all these future Major League stars to shut up and let him coach the kids. Much to our surprise, Matt was there. Jake must have told him about the barbecue because Gwen said she hadn't. I recognized him from the photo Robin keeps on his dresser. I noticed that Matt was alone, and my senses began to flutter in anticipation of an argument. Matt came up to us, and both children ran over to hug Matt tightly. Then he straightened up and held out his hand. "You must be Sam. Jake and Robin have been telling me about you. Thanks for helping Jake with his game. He's gotten a little better over the last couple of months. Jake said you're working with him on this." Matt looked past me at Gwen. "Hi, Gwen." "Hi, Matt. Where's Nancy?" "She didn't want to come this afternoon after what happened last time. She said it was about Jake, not the adults. I think deep down she's still confused about how it turned out. Let's leave it as it is. Is it okay?" I looked at Gwen and saw it in her eyes. She would never accept that her best friend stole her husband from her. But then Gwen did something that just surprised the hell out of me. She looked me straight in the eye and gave me a smile that made me smile. Have you ever met someone you were ready to absolutely hate but eventually fell in love with? That's what happened the day I met Matt. He had such a laid-back, charming manner that tipped off the ball of vitriol I was saving up in case I met the man who broke Gwen's heart. While Gwen was talking to the other mothers, Matt returned, and we spent another 20 minutes or so getting to know each other better. He left and joined another group of fathers when he saw Gwen coming back. But just before the barbecue was over, he came up to me again. Okay, maybe that's when I'll get a warning, I thought to myself as he headed in my direction. Sam, I've done a lot of stupid things in my life, but there's only one thing I'm really ashamed of. Gwen never deserved to be abandoned like Nancy and I did to her. She is a wonderful lady and mother. My love for Gwen wasn't strong enough to resist the temptation when Nancy and I started flirting and then fell in love. I won't make excuses to myself, but I really wish Gwen all the happiness in the world. I know her well enough to see something in the way she reacts to you. Good luck to you too. With that, he turned around and left. Over the next year and a half, Gwen and I grew in love with each other as we got engaged and then got married. At school and sports events, Matt turned out to be a decent man and a good father to my 2 adopted children. I had no idea that the threat to my marriage would come not from Matt, but from another source. During the first year of our marriage, Gwen and I bought a nice old house in a great part of the city, located on a 20-acre plot. Both Jake and Robin were settling into their new schools, and seemed excited when Gwen and I told them about our plans to have 1 or 2 more children. Robin was actually excited about the prospect of becoming an older brother. Jake was at an age when he was more like, how does this affect me? It was a friendly neighborhood. Several of our new neighbors came to greet us with small gifts. Donald and Joan Green, who lived next door, were the friendliest of them all. A week after moving in, they invited the 4 of us to dinner. Gwen and I were invited to a small party of 3 other couples that the Greens were hosting the following weekend. Maybe too friendly. That's what Gwen commented when we left the party the following Friday night. What? I smiled because I really couldn't remember how it happened. A typical ignorant man. Gwen continued to undress before going to bed, watching me for signs of cheating, but she noticed my confusion and just smiled back. Come on, don't tell me you haven't noticed. I've seen her snuggle up to you at least 2 or 3 times. And when Donald asked me to dance, I thought he was trying to give me a leg up. Damn, I felt like we were back in high school. I looked back and really remembered watching them dancing together. At the time, I thought Donald was just a lousy dancer. But now I know better. What a horny asshole. I'll have to keep an eye on him. It's fun, but it was a weird party. When I was talking to the Collins couple, I felt like I was going through a job interview. And when we said we were leaving, the Greens seemed disappointed. But the others breathed a sigh of relief, as if they couldn't wait for the door to close behind us. The girls invited me to join them at the spa, which they are going to visit on the coast next month. I'm not sure I want to go. Why not? When was the last time you had the opportunity to spend a weekend with the girls? Not once in all the time I've known you. And you always say how much you wish you had a few girlfriends. Think about it. By this time, we were both naked, and Gwen pushed me back onto the bed, straddling me with her legs. Are you trying to get rid of me? You know that's not true, I replied, kissing her. Up to this point, I had avoided saying anything about our lives. I have always considered myself lucky that the two previous women in my life were very good lovers. I'll just say that I'm not missing anything with Gwen. Next month, Gwen was supposed to join the ladies for a 2-day weekend at a luxury spa. I was invited to join the husbands at Donald's house for poker. We've been playing poker for a couple of hours now. The booze flowed like a river. The language and themes became more and more obscene. Hal Collins even shared some intimate details of their lives. More intimate than I was willing to share, although I could feel 3 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for me to relax. After another 10 minutes of banter, Collins told David, "Why don't you get another deck of cards? They don't bring me luck." David laughed before standing up and taking a deck of playing cards from behind the counter. At first I thought the cards would be marked and I would start losing, but then David shuffled the cards, Larry took off the deck, and David dealt each of us 5 cards. Before taking my cards, I examined the backside as carefully as possible for any markings. When I turned over the cards to see what I had been dealt, I experienced the strongest shock of my life. Each card had a picture of Joan Green on it. The 3 of diamonds was a photo of Joan sandwiched between 2 guys. Ace captured her sitting on some guy's lap with her feet on his lap. She was smiling at the camera. I looked up. All 3 men laid their cards face up on the table. There were 15 more pictures of Joan Green, with women, more men on the bed and by the pool. I looked from the cards to the 3 pairs of eyes staring at me with silly grins on their faces. David was the first to say something. "What do you think of that, Sam?" I ordered them special. All 3 of them started laughing at my silence. "In case you haven't figured it out by now, we're swingers, and we'd like you and Gwen to join our group." I found the power of speech. "That's not going to happen. Neither Gwen nor I are involved in cheating. Sam, it's not cheating when you agree to switch, and I wouldn't be so sure that your little innocent Gwen is so innocent. What you don't know is that Joan and the other girls were talking to Gwen, and Joan told me that Gwen seemed more than a little curious. Why do you think they planned this spa vacation? To give us a chance to talk to you and convince you that you can take your cake and eat it too." I started to get up. "That's bullshit." David tossed me 2 cards. "Look at them, Sam." Joan's expression was a combination of delight and pain. "Do you think any woman would be able to resist trying this at least once in her life? We won't introduce Gwen to Yuvans until the 3 of us try it first. I don't want to spoil her too soon. Add a little ecstasy to her and she will crave Juvana, just like the rest of the girls. It's worth a look." I was so angry that I thought I could lash out at the 3 of them and beat them half to death. Part of me kept my sanity and realized that I didn't believe their statements about Gwen's involvement in all this. I needed to talk to Gwen before I did something that would land me in jail. I went out the door to the patio and returned to my house. Standing in the kitchen, I had to think. I held the phone in my hand, ready to call Gwen, but I hesitated. I needed to look Gwen in the eye for this conversation. When I asked her if she was involved in this, if she was thinking about making love to these perverts, I wanted to look at her and see if she was telling me the truth. It was already 2 a.m. Gwen was supposed to be home in 10 hours. Then we would have talked. Unfortunately, Gwen's parents dropped Jake and Robin off at the house half an hour before Gwen got home. I couldn't have this conversation when 2 kids could overhear us. The situation got worse when I saw the look on Gwen's face when she walked through the door. Something was wrong. She hugged me wonderfully, kissed me on the lips, but there was sadness in her eyes. My heart wanted to burst. "What's happening?" "Gwen, we need to talk." "Yes, Sam, we need to talk, but not here in front of the children. I'll take the day off tomorrow. Can you do it? We'll talk in the morning when the kids go to school, okay?" Gwen and I danced around each other for the rest of the day, concentrating hard on the kids to pass the time. The hardest part was going to bed. We went to bed 2 hours later than usual. I spent those hours in the garage. When I finally climbed into our bed, Gwen moved closer and hugged me. "I love you," was all she said. I took a sleeping pill. I think Gwen did the same thing. I blacked out after a few minutes. I woke up to the sun shining through the window. It's a good sign for Portland. I went downstairs just as the kids were leaving to catch the school bus. Each of them kissed me on the cheek, said they loved me, and walked out the door. An ordinary school morning. which I hoped wouldn't change after Gwen and I talked. I felt the sword of Damocles hanging over my head as I sat and waited for Gwen to join me. How can a woman who woke up, cooked breakfast for the children, dressed in a bathrobe, and had her hair pulled back in a ponytail look so damn gorgeous? Gwen got right to the point. Sam, what is this nonsense about wanting to swap partners with neighbors and their sneaky friends? Why do you think I want to switch? Isn't that what you were talking about with those fools? Wait a minute. Are you accusing me of this? I never said I wanted to change. They told me that you and the boys were planning this shit. They said that's why you persuaded me to go to the spa with them. I told them that we both got divorced because of cheating spouses, and we had an ironclad pact against cheating. They told me that it's not cheating when a husband and wife agree to switch partners. That's the same shitty phrase they used against you. Gwen and I looked at each other. It may have been early in the morning, but the light bulbs in our heads flashed at the same time. They were playing with us. There were tears in Gwen's eyes. Now I wish we'd talked about it last night. I was worried all day yesterday that we were going to have a protracted fight over their offer to join them. I continued to tell Gwen about the card game. Gwen told me that women tried to play with her in the same way. They presented it as if I was interested in the exchange and wanted her to agree to the plan. We walked in circles, and in the end I had to ask, what makes you think I'd be interested in these women? Didn't I say you were my ideal? Sam, you should already know that almost every woman, especially when she is over 30, is at least a little insecure. And I saw all 3 of these women naked last weekend. They all look great, especially Joan. I do not know if she had a job, but this woman is well built. I couldn't believe these photos. I don't find any eroticism in it. I looked at Gwen. Something was still wrong. What's the matter, baby? I can tell that something is still swarming inside and waiting for the exit. What's on your mind? Sam, I hope you don't hate me, but something else happened this weekend and I'm ashamed of myself. Oh? I'll try to stay calm, Gwen. Go on, tell me. Gwen took a deep breath and began. Her eyes alternated between looking at me and her hands as she spoke. All the girls wanted to get a massage and convinced me that I needed one too. I didn't see anything wrong with that. The spa seemed like a respectable place to me. That's when I saw all the women naked. It didn't seem like anything special to me. I've seen naked women since I played sports in high school and college. I wrapped myself in a towel and lay down on the massage table. The girls handed me a glass of wine. 2 massage therapists came into the room, and I was surprised that both of them were men. One was tall and blonde, and the other was a stocky guy of Mediterranean appearance. But first, each of them started working with Joan Green and Tina Collins. I sat and watched, drinking wine. I wanted to make sure that the massage was legal, and it seems that it was. Nothing that any of the men did aroused my suspicions. At the same time, the wine made me feel warm inside, and by the time I finished my glass, I felt a tingling sensation. When it was my turn, the girls said that they had a special treat in store for me. I lay down on my back, covering myself with a sheet from my hips to my chest. One guy started working on my neck and shoulders, and the tall blonde guy started working on my feet and calves. Gwen paused to catch her breath. I didn't like where this was going, but I held my tongue. Gwen had a problem with that, and I didn't want to interrupt her. She looked at me and continued. And then as soon as the blonde moved his fingers to where I wanted, I sat down. I grabbed the sheet, wrapped it around my body, and got the hell out of there. In the end, I went back to my room. Thank God you persuaded me to move into my own room. I cried for at least an hour, not answering the phone or knocking on the door. I couldn't believe how close these 2 men came to using me like that. I'm not like that. I've never been like this. I realized that Gwen had never heard the full story of why Julie and I divorced. She knew Julie was cheating, but I never told her about the attempted exchange with the Taylors. Gwen listened when I told her everything. It's been a long day. Now I had a huge problem. Gwen and I had just bought this house and now lived next door to a sick couple who tried to manipulate us with lies. We couldn't afford to sell the house. We would have lost tens of thousands of dollars. Besides, with the exception of the Greens, we liked the neighborhood. And the kids have just moved in too. But how can we live next door to people whom we absolutely hate and who disgust us? Plus, part of me just wanted to make them suffer for their attempt to manipulate us, regardless of our marriage. Perhaps they were even the reason for the divorce of the previous owners. If we couldn't move, maybe the Greens could be persuaded to move. But how? I racked my brain for several days until it dawned on me. Both the Greens and the Collins had reputations and prominent positions in the city. They were swingers, but they kept it a secret. And even if someone thought the Greens were swingers, in a liberal-minded city like Portland, was it such a big deal? Most people would think that this implies an exchange of partners between two couples. What's the problem? But I saw those playing cards, the photos that Donald thought would excite and encourage me to join their little gang. More than a few photos were taken at their pool. The Greens had a high privacy fence and shrubbery that prevented any snooping. I even looked out of our upstairs bedroom window and didn't see anything. Besides, it wouldn't do me any good to film their next orgy from anywhere on our territory. Most likely, it would be an invasion of privacy. I could have embarrassed the Greens, maybe even forced them to move, but in the end I would have been sued and maybe I would have lost. I had to find a way to film the orgy from a place that couldn't be tied to me. The drone. I've researched drones and found that even the quietest ones can be heard when they hover overhead at night. How do I set the drone in a shooting position without hovering overhead? I looked at the top of the Greens' roof and an idea came to me. It would take practice and patience, but I think it could be done. With the general plan in mind, I sat down next to Gwen and told her about my plans. I thought it would take some hard persuasion, but Gwen not only supported me, she identified some gaps in my initial plans and suggested improvements. One thing was clear. It was just the two of us. No, neither the children nor our parents nor our best friends should have known what we had done. At least until the statute of limitations expires. I bought the quietest drone I could find and paid for it in cash. Anyone who grew up playing video games will attest to how easy it is to control a drone. After a few hours of practice, any gamer can land a decent drone with a good camera on a dime pad, or even better, with several extension cords on the legs, on the roof canopy. A second proboscis camera will be attached to the front of the drone, giving it the appearance of a mosquito. I took a few days off and went out of town to practice. By the second evening, I was able to get the drone to hover from the back of the abandoned barn, along the top to the front, planted on the front of the top so that its proboscis hangs over the edge. I was ready. Now I needed a way to find out when the Greens were having fun. It turned out to be simple. Although I couldn't look inside their complex from a second-floor window, I could through a small hole I drilled into the wall from the attic. I inserted a second camera into the hole and connected the repeater to my laptop. Every Friday and Saturday night for the next 3 weeks, I checked the camera every few hours to see if there was a party going on. On the Saturday evening of the third weekend, I got into this mud. At 10 o'clock, there were 3 couples and 4 unaccompanied men in the pool area. Nothing was happening at the moment, but there were opportunities in the situation. I went to the garage, took the lid off the drone and launched it. I came out of the garage and looked up and down the street. Everything was quiet. Using the controls, I lifted her off the garage floor, took her out the door and lifted her over the front lawn. Running back into the house, I turned on the monitor and opened the drone's camera app. Now I controlled her with the camera so that she moved along the roofline until she was at the very edge of the top. She landed on the top smooth as silk, exactly where I needed her. I turned on the proboscis camera and focused. The camera captured 2/3 of the pool area, clearly enough to make out the faces even in low light. One of the women was swimming topless in the pool with a man. I didn't know the couple, so maybe it was her husband. I let the computer record what was happening and went to the kitchen for a beer. It was my first chance to tell Gwen, who was watching a movie in the living room, what was going on. She took a glass of wine and joined me in the study. Just after midnight, we had enough footage for a decent movie. I had all the necessary personnel. When the party next door went inside, I fired up the drone again and sent it back to our garage. I spent Sunday morning editing the video. There would be no doubt who the main characters were. The faces of David and Joan Green were prominently highlighted. The movie editing program was easy to learn. Within an hour, I learned how to zoom in on the parts I wanted to show, and even learned how to stop the action. It took several days to upload copies of the video to various free sites. Several Tumblr accounts were happy to upload snippets to their sites. Several other amateur sites loaded the entire 30 minutes. When enough copies went on the air, I started the final stage, informing the Greens' neighbors, business partners, and work colleagues that the video could be watched. I was especially careful to make sure that the ad campaign couldn't be linked to me. But once the campaign was started, it took on a life of its own and grew. A week later, a for sale sign appeared on the lawn in front of the greenhouse. I heard they moved to Los Angeles. They probably fit into the right company there. No one has figured out how the video was shot, since the camera angle left no doubt that the video was filmed from the Greens' own home. Most people assumed that the Greens were filming their own orgies, and the recording was intercepted or the video was stolen. Whenever this topic came up, I put forward my own theory. The Greens recorded their orgies on tape, stored video recordings on a computer, and the Greens' computer was hacked. Someone trying to steal personal data suddenly found a gold mine. One of the other two couples involved in that night's orgy even tried to sue the Greens for invasion of privacy. I heard that this lawsuit was quietly settled, but it's just a rumor. I must admit, for months after the Greens left, I wondered if I would have any bad karma for ruining their lives in Portland. I believed that my actions were justified. After all, if the Greens had just asked us to switch, we would have given them a direct answer and refused. But I couldn't put up with the manipulation. If karma has a problem with my nuclear response, well, go ahead. I didn't have to wait long for an answer to my questions. One afternoon, 4 months later, I came home from work and found my mom and dad in our living room. Gwen's parents were there too. They were sitting with Jake and Robin on the big couch. "Mom, Dad, what brought you to the city?" I looked at Gwen and then at her parents and children. Everyone except Gwen had the same puzzled expression on their faces. Gwen broke the silence. "I called your mom and dad here because they need to hear it firsthand, and it wouldn't be fair to my parents or my children if everyone didn't hear it at the same time. There are no favorites in this family, isn't that what we said?" Gwen's words made me think of the vow we made to each other the day I proposed. What if she and I had children of our own? Would I play favorites? "Sam, we're going to have a new baby in 8 months. You're going to be a father again." Gwen looked at Jake and Robin. Again. Group hugs, handshakes, a few kisses, and of course a lot of tears. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch of our house and smoked a cigar. My father was sitting next to me. After a few puffs, he started talking. "Your mother and I are thinking of selling the house in Michigan and moving here. Your mom wants to be closer to her grandson, and we both began to see Jake and Robin as our grandchildren too. Do you have any thoughts on this?" "Dad, the only thing that has always made it difficult for me to move to Portland is the distance it has created between me and both of you. I wouldn't want anything better, and I know Gwen feels the same way. We couldn't be happier. Sam, your mom and I couldn't be more proud of the way you've grown up. This is mainly due to you and, of course, your grandfather. I would have to be a big loser to mess up how many benefits were given to me." "Yes, but many children get benefits and just negate them. Add to that the bad luck with those two women at home and you get a recipe for failure. And I was walking this way until you and Pete dragged me out of the house that day and sobered me up. Oh, I have no doubt that you would have gotten there yourself. It just might have taken a little longer." I looked over my shoulder and made sure we were alone. "Dad, I never asked and you don't need to tell me, but was Mom your first love?" Dad looked over his shoulder, and I realized that I had learned some big, dark secret. "Sam, I saw your mom in chemistry class when I was in high school. It took me a few weeks to get up the courage. She was just so damn beautiful. But I asked her out, and we've been together ever since. It's one case in 1,000, but I'm so lucky." "So why did you have to look over your shoulder before you told me that?" "Because I have a secret that I've been hiding from your mother all these years. Your mother thinks she was stalking me all those years ago. I never told her that I was sitting 2 rows away from her with puppy dog eyes. She doesn't know that it took me all these weeks to get up the courage to ask her out. She decided that I was too popular to notice the new girl at school. It may seem silly to you, but I always thought that I would keep this secret until I died, and that day I would tell her this one secret. It looks like one of those cheesy romance novels she reads. Corny, isn't it?" After listening to Dad's confession, I took a deep drag on my cigar. I didn't want him to see the moisture in my eyes and realize that I was suffocating. Then Dad continued, "You're only 38. With a little luck and hard work, you and Gwen will celebrate your 50th birthday together. You will have children and grandchildren who will celebrate with you. I have a feeling for this girl that I've never had for the other two. Gwen is the one and only." I had to take another big drag. I doubt Dad was fooled. This conversation on our veranda with my father took place 5 years ago. 8 months later, Gwen had a baby girl, whom we named after our mothers. Mom and Dad sold a house in Michigan and bought 2 hectares on the riverbank northwest of the city in St. Helens. Kevin and I are resisting offers from a major national beer brand to buy our 4 pubs and a brewery. We resist because we are doing great financially, and most importantly, we are still having fun. Neither Kevin, Sally, nor Gwen are greedy, so it just works. When Gwen and I had our second child, a boy whom we named after my grandfather, We decided that 4 would be enough. The way Gwen has kept fit after 4 children is a miracle. I look at this woman every chance I get. She laughs out loud because sometimes I sit on the toilet and just watch her take a shower. It took several years, but we even invited Matt, Nancy, and their 2 children to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. It was a difficult decision, but we decided that when Jake and Robin grow up, it will be easier if all the adults in their lives can gather in one room, especially if it's to celebrate and thank you for all the blessings we've had in our lives. Gwen's parents and my parents were there too. The evening before dinner, we had to sit with Gwen's mom and explain the rules. This woman may have a sharp tongue, and she still gets angry when Nancy's name is mentioned. But the first Thanksgiving went off without a hitch, so we repeated this last year. I think it made a proper impression on my adopted children. I think that was my way of telling you. Maybe a little verbose, but damn it, we weren't doing anything else, sitting on this river and pretending that we were going to catch some fish today. That life sometimes just challenges you, especially when it comes to finding the one. It took my father 1 try and me 3, but I'm a big enough romantic to believe that everyone has a soulmate. Just remember that you can't agree. The epilogue. With that, Sam reached into the fridge again and pulled out 2 cold ales. Yes, they were now canning their own ale at the brewery. He threw one to William, his young protege, a 30-year-old guy who will one day take over the post of general manager of a restaurant. But first, William will have to go through the heartbreak he suffered when his last girlfriend ran away. With their dog, no less. Sam wondered if anything he had said that morning had sunk in, or if the hurt was too acute. Well, I tried, he thought, opening the lid and taking a sip of Kevin's latest creation. Damn, Kevin knows a lot about hops. He smiled silently. End.